Do you wish that you could be more organized and efficient with your content creation? Well, today I'm taking you behind the scenes of my own content creation process. I'll share how I plan a year's worth of content, transform podcast episodes into micro content, and efficiently reimagine the content across multiple platforms. And whether you realize it or not, knowing your content creator archetype and your strengths will directly impact how you achieve this. So whether you're a precision planner like me or a free spirit, the key is to find a method that works for you. And if you'd like to have guided support to make all of this happen and more, then we can work together in the Content Accelerator. Welcome to the Powerful Content Podcast, your go-to source for content creation, strategy, and business inspiration. I'm your host, Mel Daniels, content strategist, coach and speaker, empowering women across the globe to grow their business with powerful content that connects, nurtures, and converts. So if you're ready to create standout content that gets you noticed and remembered, or build an aligned audience who love you and are ready to buy from you, you're in the right place. I believe that content has the power to connect us all. It's up to you how you use it. Listen in for genuine and insightful chats with guests, as well as practical tools and strategies from me. It's so lovely to have you here. Let's dive into the show. I acknowledge the Wongal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of the country that I am recording from today. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nation people listening today. Simply head to the show notes to find out more. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to episode 130 of the Powerful Content Podcast. I hope you're well today. It's so lovely to have you here with me. Thank you for being here with me. Now, today I thought I'd go behind the scenes and give you a really quick glimpse into what goes on in my own business and how I create content so that you can maybe take some pieces that resonate with you or ideas on how you can actually change up the way you create and what you create as well. Now, I recently stepped my members inside the content effect through just the imagination process. And that's how I take my podcast and create micro content for it. And they absolutely loved it. So it was a great reminder for me to make sure that I share more behind the scenes content with you as well. You know, funnily enough, I even saw someone recently share an offer that was a behind the scenes in her business. She was charging, I think, an early bird price of US $97 to have access to a Google Doc that outlined her daily activities for, I think it was about 3 months. Her unique point of difference here is that she works 20 hours a week. So she was really cleverly illustrating what she can get done in that limited amount of time every day. Well, anyway, I kind of digress here, but I'm not going to charge you for what I tell you today. So I hope you've got your notepad ready or the notes app open on your phone because you're going to need it. Now, the first thing that I want to say before I dive into the content of this episode is that I'm a precision planner content creator archetype. So I have a propensity to want to be organized and in control, have things scheduled out. If you're a free spirit, a collector, or observer, please take what you need from this episode or what you think is doable and implement them one small step at a time. Please don't think that all of these things are things that you should be doing. And if you're not sure on what your content creator archetype is, then head to the show notes to find the link to the quiz. It's 8 quick questions, so you'll be back listening to the podcast in no time. So here goes. The very first thing I do at the beginning of each year, yes, each year, when it's the slow time and long summer days are happening here in Australia, I really love to make space to come up with a year's worth of core content ideas. And when I talk about core content, I'm talking about that meaty, bingeable content, the blog, the podcast, or video that you need to have for your business. Now, as I have fortnightly solo podcast episodes, that's 26 episode ideas that I need to come up with. Plus, I do a few extras in launch time and a few at the end of the year are best of episodes. And I like to have a few up my sleeve in case I want to rejig the schedule. So I come up with about 30 topic ideas. Now, that might seem a lot, but I have a super simple method of brainstorming and then using AI to amplify my ideas. And if you want to know more about this method, then I have a short training, Unleash Your Ideas, available for purchase in the show notes. Once I have all of these ideas, I'll usually write a list for the quarter of people who I'd like to interview and reach out to them. But to be honest, my schedule is usually filled about 6 months in advance anyway. But if there's any gaps, or if I'm thinking about participating in a bundle or a summit, then I'll make sure that I have room to have that person on the podcast at the right time. So now that I have all of my ideas and I'm feeling a little bit excited about them, I move on to the planning side of things. I'll fill out my plan with any planned promotions that I have, any launches that I want to do, and what I want my content objectives to be each month. And I do this for the entire year. Now, inside of my membership, The Content Effect, we do this on a 90-day rolling cycle, which is much more manageable for people, but I love to do it a whole year in advance. I'll then complete a theme for the topic that I want to talk about that fits in with all of these bits and pieces each month, and then break this down into the podcast titles and the planned guests. Now, doing all of this at the beginning of the year, this planning process, makes the production of each episode so much easier, as it's one less thing that I have to think about. I don't have to spend time scratching my head, wondering what on earth I'm going to be talking about, because I know exactly what I'll be talking about and how that fits into the direction my business is taking at that time. Now, I'm all about content first. So that means creating your blog, your podcast, or video as your main piece of content. People need a place that they can go to find out all about you and your approach to what you do. I have people stumble across my episode and then download 50 or 100 episodes. And that makes me really excited to think that they have found me and they want to know more about me. So I really encourage you to do that with your blog or your podcast or your video as well. Now, because I'm that planner archetype, I try and batch my episodes by the month. Doesn't always go to plan, might I say. So I'll write out the majority of the points for each of the episodes and then I'll record them. I'll often leave the editing to the last minute, but the majority of the work will be done up front. So this means I'll prepare 2, sometimes 3 episodes at the end of each month, ready for the following month. Now, one thing I don't do with my podcast, which I'd love to do, is to upload the video of at least the guest episodes to YouTube. I'm not sure whether this would be a little weird, as I'm not really super keen to upload my solo episodes, as that would mean that I need to actually look presentable. And if you saw me right now, I do not look presentable. But hey, would love to hear your advice or your opinion on whether I should upload the videos to YouTube. So when I've recorded and edited the podcast, there is a whole heap of steps that I do at the same time. And this is all recorded in my processes. I'll write 2 lots of promotional copy to use on social media, one with a direct quote from the podcast. I'll do the show notes. I'll create a blog. I choose a snippet from the podcast that I can use as an audiogram. I will summarize the episode, which I'll use as a base for the pre-show intro, and in my email, which I'll talk about in a minute, I pull out some questions I can ask my audience, real ideas, insights. They're just simply paragraphs of text that I can reuse, and carousels if the episode lends itself to that type of social media post. So now I have my core piece of content. The next step is to reimagine it. And I'll do this via email as well as social media content using all of those things that I've just listed. And at the time of recording, I am on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn as my social media platforms. I'm also sending an email to my subscribers twice a week. So one of those emails is dedicated solely to the promotion of the podcast. And this email is practically already written, as I'll use the summary I created in that previous publishing stage of my podcast. I might add in some personal stories or some ideas that I've taken from the social media posts and the show notes that I created previously as well. And the second email is usually a story of some description about the same theme if it was a solo episode. So for this particular episode, I will do one email that promotes the episode, but I'll also do one email that talks about the power of reimagination, perhaps. Now, I write both of these emails in the moment, literally the day before they are due to go out. And I do this for 2 reasons. One, I like for it to be super relevant and current and add in any personal stories or things that are going on in my life in real time. And the other reason is that I'm really good at it. So it takes me about 15 minutes to write one of these emails. And because it's in my calendar, I don't forget to do it. Now, if you're a free spirit content creator archetype, this in the moment type approach may actually appeal to you, but I'd really like you to be a little cautious because when you're not feeling it and your email doesn't go out and then you're not feeling it again the next time, then your subscribers might forget about you. Your emails might end up in spam, or it could actually lead to a high rate of unsubscribes. So by all means, create in the flow, but have a plan in place to support you to become consistent. That may be a written plan, it may be reminders, or even co-working groups like I host inside the Content Effect. So now I've got the podcasts planned and the emails written in the moment. That leaves my social media. So as I mentioned, at the moment, I show up on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. But before I dive into how I create and publish this content, I really want to remind you that social media in and of itself is not a strategy. You cannot rely on your content getting in front of enough people, let alone the right people. And there's no point in trying to hack algorithms, and please don't waste your time or your brain space on this. But on the flip side, we do need to make sure that we're on social media as more and more people are actually using the platforms for search, for validity, which is all about understanding whether you are actually authentic, and for their purchasing decisions as well. So the more opportunities that we give our ideal client to connect with us, to see with us, the better. So having said this, you really need to make sure that the effort that you do place in social media content is efficient as well as effective. And by effective, I mean strategic. So to become strategic on socials, you can follow the simple social media plan, which I talk about way back in episode 10, which is based on the client journey. So the client journey is where we take our ideal client from not knowing anything about us all the way through to becoming a raving paying client of ours. And that journey is based on connect, subscribe, nurture, convert, and onboard. So with my social media, I'm always ensuring that I have an evenish spread of content that relates to the client journey so that I'm doing my purposeful best to move them along the journey with me when and if they actually come across my content. So with all of this in mind, let's start with LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I post 3 times a week on this platform, and once a week is a direct promo of my podcast. And this is an audiogram that's posted with promotional copy, which I've already created back when I created my episode. When my team publishes the podcast, I'll also schedule the blog for the following week and schedule the podcast related posts to socials, including LinkedIn. The other 2 posts on LinkedIn per week are a mix of connect, subscribe, and convert. So I usually look at LinkedIn on a fortnightly basis. So I can do one of each type of post, and then the last post will be related to whatever my objective is for that particular month for my content. So remember I mentioned that back in the planning stage, each month is allocated an objective. So whatever my focus is, I will be creating that extra piece of content based on that. So as an example, if I'm focusing on building my list that particular month, the extra post will be a subscribe post. And if I'm launching, it might be a convert post. So these posts on LinkedIn are scheduled in advance each fortnight, except for the podcast promo, which is usually scheduled by my team on a weekly basis to my business page and then reshared with the link onto my personal profile each week. So that's LinkedIn. With Facebook, I'll schedule an entire month's worth of content in advance. I've got a fortnightly rolling schedule that covers the client journey, but for me, Facebook is more of a landing page for my business. It's not something that necessarily drives engagement. So from the podcast, there's that direct promotion again, plus a quote that I'll share each week from the podcast. Then I'll draw from a bank of promotional copy that I have for all of my lead magnets, as well as all of my services for any of the subscribe and convert posts, depending on what my focus is. If I'm looking at, for example, growing my Facebook group that particular month, that may be my subscribe post or a particular lead magnet. I'll always focus on one for the entire month. And this is because if someone happens to see it twice, then it will remind them to take action. The other nurture content that I tend to use is the carousels that I've pulled out from my podcast and the insights that I extracted from the podcast at the time of creating it. So then there's my Facebook group. I'll often use a couple of questions generated from my podcast episode post-production and schedule them in. Another day is dedicated to a direct promo of the podcast, so that will be scheduled by my team. Fridays are hashtag Friday Live, where you can go live inside the content project, and Wednesdays are hashtag MyBiz, where you get to promote something going on in your business. So for me, those will be solely focused on whatever I am promoting that month, which then leaves Mondays in the Facebook group for any kind of in the moment type things that I want to share. Now, lastly is Instagram. Now, something really strange that I'm seeing with Instagram for me at the moment is that if I schedule content to Instagram via Meta Business Suite, so I'm not using a third-party scheduler, then the reach and engagement is generally less. And this is one of the reasons I really suggest that you make sure that you're tracking your analytics on at least a monthly basis so that you can kind of pick up on these trends and see for yourself what's working and what's not working for your business. So with Instagram at the moment, I usually post in the moment in the evening, and it's often just a copy and paste of something that I've shared on Facebook. But a little side note here. I'm currently looking at growing my podcast further, and in doing so, focusing on simply using Instagram in relation to the content I share on my podcasts. So I'll let you know more about this experiment if I choose to go down this path. I'll still use the principles of the client journey, so that's connect, subscribe, nurture, and convert. But all the subscribe posts will be pointing towards the podcast and subscribing to the podcast, and the rest will relate to the current content I'm sharing that particular week on the podcast. I'll keep you posted. And lastly, to increase the reach of someone stumbling across my podcast, I put it on Google My Business as a post. I'd strongly recommend doing this for your core piece of content. It's really easy and quick, and also gives your business a little bit more authority when someone Googles it. So that's my entire process. Each quarter, I'll do a quick check-in with the headlines that I created at the beginning of the year for all of my podcasts to make sure that it still aligns with my promotions and collaborations, because things do change and opportunities come up during the year. A great example of this is in the coming weeks, I'll be talking about collaborations, which wasn't originally on my podcast schedule, but that's because I am participating in a summit, I am participating in another bundle, and I am a sponsor for an upcoming Women in Business conference, which I'm a little bit excited about. So if you go to this conference, you'll actually get an amazing gift from me. So whilst I have a plan, it's always flexible. Now, all of what I've described today follows my 4 Ps to consistency, which are prepare, plan, produce, and process. So prepare is obviously coming up with all the ideas. Plan is putting the ideas into a logical sequence based on the planned promos, either on a yearly or a quarterly basis. Produce is creating and publishing the podcast. And process is all about the reimagination. I honestly have way more content available to me than what I can actually post. So even if you're creating a core piece of content once a month as opposed to weekly like I do with this podcast, you'll still have enough content to reimagine across all the places that you show up. Now, training for these 4 Ps are all available inside my membership, The Content Effect. But when you work with me one-on-one in the Content Accelerator, we touch on all of these 4 Ps, as well as so much more, so that you can walk away with a year's content plan, plus the support and the processes to make it happen, all based on your available time, energy, and resources. Simply head on down to the show notes to find out more about how we can work together to make this a reality for you. Talk soon. Thanks so much for listening. That's it for another week. To get more powerful content in your life, make sure you're following along on socials. My handle is @meldbusiness. And just in case you're wondering, the groovy music for this podcast was created by Just Here on SoundCloud. I'd also be super grateful if you took a moment to rate and review this podcast so more amazing women like you can experience the power of content. And if you're like, hell Mel, stop talking, I'm ready to work with you now, here's how we can work some powerful content magic together. Firstly, come and join the Content Effect, my membership inspiring women with service-based businesses to ditch the content chaos and start creating stand-out content that gets you noticed and makes sales. You can join us by using the link in the show notes or just Google the Content Effect. The second way we can work together is via my one-on-one packages. We can create a sustainable content strategy or start to build out your client journey. It's up to you. Pop on over to meldbusinessservices.com.au/services to find out more. Until next time, have a beautiful week and embrace the power of your content.